thinking about self-care for healthcare providers, and I think it really does apply to burn camp professionals as well. And sadly, Dr. Gabrin died of COVID on March 31st. So I think this is a really timely way to kind of acknowledge his work, even with our group. But he used the acronym REFLECT. And so, you know, kind of that idea of reflecting on the first thing, remembering. Why did you start this work in the first place? Maybe that's going back to the mission of your camp. Maybe that's going back to your personal story of being involved with burn camp as a counselor or a volunteer or a camper. But why did you get involved? So just remembering that. And then that idea of really earning your satisfaction. And if we have to look at doing things differently this year, how can we still feel satisfied with what we're doing? And then formulate. So formulating a plan. And that's part of what we really want to talk about today is how do we move forward with camp this year, if it's going to look different, if it's just going to be on hold, if it's going to be virtual, if it's going to be in person, you know, what is our plan? And then look, am I responding from a negative or a positive position? I always like to think about that too, is am I being reactive or proactive? Then evaluate, is my caring making a difference? Is what we're doing making a difference, or do we need to step back and maybe readjust? And then circling back, again, what is our mission? Are we staying within our mission with what we're planning and reassessing as we're moving forward? And then of course, any kind of self-care always ends with taking care of yourself. And I think that's so important right now, to take care of ourselves. So as we've really been talking about this, one piece of conversation that's come up quite a bit is how is the burn population, the burn survivor population, how is this COVID piece impacting them maybe uniquely or differently than other parts of our population? And so as I started kind of interviewing some campers and some families and some staff and some colleagues around the country, there were a couple of themes that came up. One was that idea of reliving the unpleasant or traumatic experiences of being in the hospital. People talked about being sequestered to their room when they were in the hospital, and now they're sequestered to their homes. And it's that idea of kind of, again, feeling like you've lost control, you're stuck at home, you can't do the things you want to do. Somebody else is sort of dictating what your life looks like, and going back to feeling like that in the hospital. So that was a big theme that came up quite a bit. Also, that idea of being isolated from people. Maybe you had an infection, maybe they had just gotten cultured skin and they couldn't have visitors. So that feeling of isolation can be really terrifying, and it's hard for our patients and our survivors to go back to that place. And lonely, I think just lonely. I think everybody's feeling lonely, but sometimes for our burn survivors, that's a little bit different. There's new layers of lonely, right? Maybe they left the hospital feeling like, oh, my peers are kind of avoiding me. People don't know what to say. Nobody knows, am I breakable? Am I not breakable? And that sense of just having to work really hard to re-engage with peers. And now you're back to that place where you're isolated, and kids aren't always the greatest at reaching out in groups. I've noticed adults are super good at setting up, Zoom cocktail hour or, Zoom meetings or Zoom coffee hour. And I'm not seeing my kids do that as much. And I don't know about other people's kids, but they're not quite as adept at that yet. So I think that sense of isolation and loneliness could run even a little bit more deeply for our campers. And then I think one that we are really starting to talk about as a culture is safety. And our campers, as we know, come from sometimes stressed, sometimes conflict tolerant households. So, physically safe, are they currently living with caregivers who are abusive or who were abusive? Emotionally, are they missing connections with trusted adults? Are they in a conflict tolerant home? Are they secluded with a volatile adult? Resource-wise, and this is something I've heard several camp professionals really worrying about, is do they have enough food? Do they have internet to be able to do their school, to be able to connect in other ways? Is camp even possible for a lot of our campers online when we think about limitations with home computers and internet? Help with school. Do they have somebody in their home who can really help them with online school? That's a hard one. And then did someone in their home lose their job? Are they feeling that pressure and stress of resources shifting? And then medically, this is a super interesting one. You know, in response to COVID, hospitals have really shut down aside from really essential cares. So does that mean they're not coming in for their follow-up physical therapy? Does that mean they're not getting their laser appointments? Does that mean the follow-up surgery they were really looking forward to having over the summer has been delayed? You know, are their medical needs being met the way they had anticipated they would be met? So those are all things that our campers are kind of grappling with that might be a little bit different than the general population. And then I wanted to kind of talk a little bit about the ACEs study. I think by now most people have heard of the ACEs study, but it's really looking at adverse childhood experiences and how adverse childhood experiences affect us throughout our lifespan. And these are things we see at camp, right? And I think I just want to bring these up because these are things that we might see amplified at camp this year. For that idea of having a hard time being flexible, they need preparation, and we just really didn't get a lot of preparation for this stay at home, safe at home, whatever, you know, each state is calling it. And so without preparation, our campers are sometimes a little bit more, they struggle when they're not prepared for changes. Boundaries can be difficult. So when you have really strict rules, like don't talk to other people, stay 6 feet apart, wear a mask when you're in public, those boundaries can be hard for our population. And they can be easily triggered, and the response might seem a lot bigger than the moment. So I think every child I know is struggling with this experience, but kids who have had adverse childhood experiences are struggling in different ways. And new situations are really challenging. I'm just going to say online school is not easy for parents, and it's not easy for students. I see some smiles on that one. And so for our campers, our population, that struggle might even be a little bit more intense. And they just have a hard time remembering rules, and they need to be reminded with patience. And the experience they're having in the world right now might be that they're not getting those reminders with patience because everybody is on edge. So you have this group of kids who really, they need to be redirected patiently. They need some calm and some very simple instructions. And instead, they're surrounded by adults who are also feeling really impatient. And it's a difficult situation. And then they also, that internal locus of control, that ability to self-soothe, that ability to go, oh, I'm noticing my shoulders are getting tense. That's probably telling me that something is going on. I should take some deep breaths. That ability is just, they need reminders, and they need some guidance and help with that. And so those are things that we might notice are even more amplified when kids do get into programming with us. Okay, so thinking about programming and what's coming up, whether that's online, whether that's, you know, connecting via mail, whether that's short one-day things with small limited number of kids, or whether that's having our whole camp. This is a year, and next year is a year that we really need to think about building trauma-informed practices into camp. We really need to be thinking about, are we following the 6 key principles of a trauma-informed approach? And those are safety. So really setting up those safety ground rules for kids. What are we doing at camp to help kids feel physically and emotionally safe? Trustworthiness and transparency. Are the adults at camp doing what we say we're going to do for the campers? Are we leading by example, or are we expecting the campers to behave one way and the adults to behave another way? Peer support. That's right. That's a huge tenet of burn programming around the country and around the world is peer support. And that's a huge piece of camp. Collaboration and mutuality. And really that goes a long way when we're asking our campers for their input on programming ideas, when we're asking them for input on conversations about cabin codes of conduct. That that piece of, we want you guys to be a part of this discussion. What do you think this should look like? And then empowerment, voice, and choice. I like to think about this a little bit in terms of how do we respond when our campers challenge us? And we respond differently. We're giving them what we might call a corrective emotional or a corrective parental experience. We're responding differently at camp than what they get at home. At camp, we're really thinking about, we're trying to empathize with the emotion behind their challenge. This has been a really hard time for you. Everybody else got to swim and you got to go do physical therapy, and now you're feeling kind of left out. And then we want to provide them with some very simple information. The pool will be open again later today, and you'll be able to swim them. And then working together to create a solution that helps them maintain a sense of control and dignity. And that's a big part of camp, right? And then cultural, historical, and gender issues. So again, just always taking into consideration the context from which kids come. What is home like for them? What are some of those cultural expectations, our cultural patterns that we should really be sensitive to at camp? So those are the big tenets of a trauma sensitive or a trauma informed approach for camp. And yeah, boy, I am so used to presenting when people are kind of right there and I hear people like making comments and feedback, and this online thing is still a little funny. So does anybody have any questions or thoughts on that?
Hey, Kristen. Yeah, we've had a few comments from
good.
Margarita Rodriguez. So Margarita wanted just to say a comment. She said it's not necessarily a question, but one of her burn survivors mentioned it relates to a lot of what you're describing of losing control during this isolation and being distant from people, and really just feeling like they can't do this anymore. So maybe even like suicidal thoughts or thoughts of like, this is really hopelessness. So that's definitely information. And then she also wanted to know, will this information you're sharing be shared in the document and resources after the presentation?
Yeah. We'll send this out.
Great. We welcome additional questions. Please just go ahead and use the chat function in Zoom, and we'll be doing additional questions throughout the presentation. If you don't have any additional questions for Kristen now, we can address them at the end of the presentation as we wrap up. So, perfect. Well, thanks, Kristen, for sharing. I know that this is a lot of great information for everyone. Next, we have Mark Koopman, also known as Coop, who will be sharing his experience. So this is just one person's experience within doing virtual programming. There's a lot of ideas out there, so this isn't the end-all be-all. We'll talk more at the end of this of what discussions we'll be doing in terms of IABC, but we're very fortunate and grateful to have Mark, a former board member of IABC, sharing with us today.
Thank you, Daniel. Appreciate it. All right, everybody, just take a moment and stretch for a second. That's right. Make yourself come. There you go. There you go. Now I know who's paying attention. I can see who's actually watching me. That's excellent. So first and foremost, I want you, as best as you can, look at me eyeball to eyeball right now, and I want you to hear what I have to say. You know, and first, I really want to applaud Kristen. You know, because Kristen really hit home on a lot of the anxiety that might be manifesting associated with adolescent burn survivors or just adolescents in general. But look me eyeball to eyeball and say this: you guys need support too. I mean, it's not by accident that busy people normally in normal times would not be available for something like this. But we have over 40 folks. And like Kristen or Daniel said, just the need to connect. And I want you to see me look at you and say that the decisions that you're making are difficult, but they're the right decisions because you've been put in a position for your respective camps with your respective camper population to be able to make not just a life enriching, but a life potential changing difference in their lives. And so as difficult as these decisions are moving forward, you will make the right decision. So what I'd like to talk about a little bit is how do we make lemonade out of lemons, right? How do we maybe look at some alternatives if our camp is postponed or if it's canceled or if there's something along those lines? And I'm going to start off by reading something, again, to try to utilize this as a support for you guys that are in a leadership team. Some of you might have heard me say this before, but I share this often when I speak to different fundraising events, and it goes like this. "'Twas battered and scarred, and the auctioneer thought it was scarcely worth its while to waste much time on that old violin, but he held up with a smile. What am I bidding, good folks? So start the bidding for me. $1, then two, only two. $2 will make it $3. $3 once, $3 twice, going for $3. But no. From the room far back, a gray-haired man, he came forward and picked up the bow. Then wiping the dust from that old violin and tightening the loose strings, he played a melody, pure and sweet, as a caroling angel sings." Well, the music ceased, and the auctioneer said, with a voice that was quiet and low, "What am I bid on this old violin?" And he held it up with a bow. $1,000 will make it 2. 2,000 will make it 3. 3,000 once, 3,000 twice, and going and gone, said he. Well, the people cheered, but some of them cried, "Do not quite understand. What changed its worth?" Swift came the reply, "That touch of the master's hand." And many a person with their life out of tune and battered and scarred with sin, they're auctioned off cheap to that thoughtless crowd, much like that old violin. A mess of pottage, a glass of wine, a game, and he's going on. He's going once, he's going twice, and going and almost gone. But the master comes, and the confused crowd never can quite understand the worth of a soul and a change that's wrought by the touch of the master's hand. Now, the reason I share this with you is when I first heard this, I thought, surely those of us in leadership positions in camp are kind of like that master. And our kids are like that violin, right? Because our kids are burn survivors and in many regards are struggling with either image-related issues or just self-identity or just finding a place, a sense of belonging. And so that master comes and wipes the dust off and tightens the loose strings, and then the audience can really see its full value and how much they appreciate that violin. It really wasn't an old violin. It was beautiful, played beautiful music. And that would be a beautiful story in itself. But I tend to think that we're more like the violin and the kids come in our lives. And not just kids, but the surrogate support staff, like our peers, our counselor peers, like some of the best people on planet Earth. They come in and they change us in a way. It's like any healthy symbiotic relationship. You go into it, you think I'm going to make a difference. But if it's really healthy and it's really good, you reach a point where you're like, am I getting more than I'm giving? And I think if we all develop that ideology that I'm just going to continue to give more, or I thought I was good, but this person's great, so I need to find another gear to shift into to reach their level of excellence, then that is the best relationship you can be in. And I feel like that as a part of the IABC. I feel like that as a part of you folks, and I wish I could say that to each and every one of you, but just looking at faces, I'm wondering how many different states we have represented, how many different camps we have represented. It's a powerful network. And I encourage you, not just with this meeting, but moving forward to just kind of share and dialogue, because again, we're probably all like the violin, our campers and ourselves as well. We're just trying to play the best, most beautiful music that we possibly can. So when we talk about those alternatives, let's talk a little bit. I'll kind of share a little bit of my personal journey. As Daniel said, this is just one man's opinion, but we were supposed to have our camp. Our camp's, I think, one of the earliest, very end of May, very beginning of June. And as we can all see from this past month, because this has really only been going on for about a month. Now, I say COVID only about a month. Obviously, it's been going on longer than that. But society as we know it was really altered a little over a month ago for most of us. So what's the next month look like? And the month after that? And we're all crystal ball gazing. We're all trying to prognosticate. We've all read multiple resources that give a whole myriad of different information from the summer to maybe the fall. It'll come back and maybe this will extend to next year. And so we're trying to figure out what to do. What we decided to do is that we postponed our camp. We decided not to cancel it. By postponement, what that meant is camp, whatever version we run, if we do run one, it's just going to be different, right? It's just not going to be the same. I mean, even if it was on the exact same location and even the same time frame, it's not going to be the same date. So it's going to be different. And how will that affect our staffing? Will they be able to make an alternative date? How will that affect our kids? What will the world look like? What will society look like? So I kind of give some encouragement. It seems fearful and daunting, but what if your camp only consisted of 10 staff and 10 kids? You still have camp, right? It'd be different. maybe the program and the activities and all the things, you know, the devil in the details, all those wonderful minutia and items that that make camp special. But I think the location does matter. You know, for me to say the location doesn't, it does. But what really matters, it's the people in the gathering. It's the people. And so if you just get together and pick up rocks in the driveway and you've got dynamic staff making it fun, that can be your version of camp. And all you have to do is take a picture of yourself picking up rocks in the driveway, a group photo, and say, this is 2020's camp. It's just different than normal. Now, if camp is not feasible for you, what about other mediums? And that's what I'm going to cover right now. So we're obviously having a Zoom meeting. And for some of you, prior to this pandemic, you didn't even know what Zoom was. You're like, what's Zoom? Now everybody has likely heard of it in some capacity. For some of you, this might be your first one. Whereas Tom Flam referenced earlier, he has one every day because that's the new normal. That's what he's doing. So how do we integrate that into our camp program potentially? And I think this is an opportunity. You know, with all the devastating things that have taken place, what opportunities do we have to enrich our own personal lives, our professional lives, and our camp network lives? Social media platforms is a phenomenal example. Matter of fact, once things get back to normal, we're going to still utilize these platforms because it's a great way to connect. And plus, if we look at Generation Z and beyond, it's how they connect anyway, right? Right? It's how they do it. You know, so if you were just on Facebook before, guess what? Most of our kids are not on Facebook. They're just not. They're on other mediums and other platforms. And so that doesn't mean, because it seems daunting, depending on what generation you're in or what your technological savviness is. I suggest start small because it seems huge. It's like, don't eat the king size Snickers bar, even though you want to eat the king. Now I'm hungry for Snickers bar. Start with the fun size. Take a little bite out of something so it doesn't seem so daunting, right? How do we protect ourselves? Like with this particular meeting, one of the things I've always appreciated about Daniel in general is Daniel's very professional. You know, before he runs a meeting, he wants to make certain the ducks are in a row. He's not going to wing it. It's going to come across as good as he possibly can in that capacity. And so we do the same thing during our week of camp, right? We make certain we do background checks. We make certain we have training. We make certain that we're prepared. We're purchasing things in advance. So when the kids show up, we're not winging it. Well, with social media platforms, we need to think the same way. We don't want to just wing it. So, for example, if you have a staff member that's maybe leading something, they need to be background checked. You know, that makes certain that they're background checked. Daniel's recording this, right? And so the IABC has a brand. And the brand is, how long has IABC been around for? Does anybody know? How many years? Let's just say a lot of years. So no one has to respond. It's been around a lot of years.
21.
21 years. There you go. In of itself. I'm going to read a quote from Benjamin Franklin. It takes many good deeds to build a good reputation, only one bad one to lose it. Only one bad one. So in 21 years, if Daniel's recording this today, and there's something that's subject for scrutiny, like severe scrutiny in some capacity, you don't want to have that 21 years worth of labor and all those board members and all those membership folks to kind of unravel with one critical mistake. So with your social media platforms, you need to think of it in that context. You have built a brand, and your brand is valuable, and it's very important. So make certain that the people representing your brand, because it's done in a public forum, right? That the ones that you want representing you in the positive connotation. We have the rules of three at camp. Everybody pretty much knows the rules of three, but if you don't, you obviously don't want to be caught in an isolated situation with a camper. I think social media platforms are the exact same way. Like if I were going to try to conduct a meeting and then everybody gets off except for me and 3 or 4 campers, that's not a healthy environment for them or for yourself. You should have more than one adult that are there till the very end. So make certain that you're thinking of that in that context. That way no accusations can be made in isolation. I suggest one of the resources I'll provide and make available is the ACA social media policies. If you don't have a social media policy, we can make those available, I think even from respective camps as well. And again, steal from one another. Tom, I think, said not that long ago, one of the greatest forms of flattery is when someone borrows something that you've already utilized. And so you might look at adapting your social media policy kind of in this new normal too, just kind of add platforms along these lines and just make certain that the rules of engagement. I know this sounds silly, but when you have opening day at staff training, or I'm sorry, for camp, I mean, I'm sure some of you guys talk about appropriate dress and appropriate language and all those types of things. It might sound like a silly little thing, but you want your staff, if they're involved in something like this, even if they're dressed casually, to not be wearing something inappropriate. And that doesn't necessarily mean they have to be wearing like camp brand logo or anything along those lines, but they need to look the part if they're representing the part in some capacity as well. And so those are just setting some table prior to having any social media platform. Just kind of think through it, almost like you would like if you're running your camp, the week of camp, keeping it as professional and as appropriate as possible. So platforms, there's a lot of different platforms on out there. I'll list a few of them that come right off the top of my head. There's WhatsApp, there's Facebook Messenger, there's FaceTime, Google Duo, Discord, House Party, Zoom, WebEx. And so there's other platforms beyond this one. And it only takes probably a quick Google search, to be able to find what platform you might want to use. I'll speak specifically on Zoom because that's the account that we've been using. There's a free service. And so if free sounds good to you, then I'd say go for it. We went with a paid service for two major reasons. Number one, $15 a month. That's it, for basically a network of 100. So we've got 40 some odd people here. It's a $15 a month. $15 a month, 100 people's perfect for us. And then it gives the ability to record. Then I've also heard through the grapevine that the phone connection through Zoom, through the free service, sometimes it's been spotty due to the level of usage. So with a paid service, you kind of overcome that obstacle in some capacity, plus the ability just to record and maybe use this. It's funny how this is an opportunity to connect, but it's also going to have other variables in the future. Like you can, if you have a camper on there and they say something amazing, that can be potentially an opportunity for a marketing capacity in the future. So you can think of it, and it also is a historical archive. So somebody maybe 20, 30 years from now might be able to say, oh my gosh, I'm so grateful that somebody from this respective camp had the ability to record this stuff, because now we're going to use this in some capacity, especially if you have anniversaries. If you hit your 25-year anniversary, your 50-year anniversary, your 75-year anniversary, your 100-year anniversary, this is stuff that you could use in the future. It's not just present time stuff, so it can be golden in that capacity as well. So what are we doing right now? Our particular camp got on the social media bandwagon right off the bat. And this is where I suggest starting small, right? Because it seems daunting. What do I do with this? There's a lot of things that you can do, and I'll reference some of the things that we're thinking about. But when I say keep it small, I almost kind of look like this at going to a conference. You go to a major conference and you're inundated with ideas. You get like 50 to 100 great things that you can do. I usually write down 3 of my top. When I get back home, I say, I'm just going to work on 3 that maybe only take me 10 to 15 minutes to be able to incorporate into who we are and what we do. So that's where I want to start with you guys. So if you're going to start really, really small, all of you have a smartphone. I would assume almost all, if not all of you, have a smartphone. Encourage one of your staff members to shoot a 30-second video on how to wash your hands, and do it to a camp song. Do it to a camp song. They're singing the camp song, they're washing their hands, you're showing video of the front and the back. We hit the 30 seconds. There's your little PSA. Simple, done and done, right? If you got more creative staff, do one on social distancing. They can even do it in their home. And in their home, they've got themselves and then either their spouse or their loved one or their kids, and make it almost ridiculous. They don't have to be 6 feet away. Have them 20 feet away. have them get 2 paper cups and a string, almost like the old telephone game, and say, this is how we communicate now in the Smith house, proper social distancing. And then at the end, you can say, of course, we're kind of being dramatic and we're joking a little bit, but social distancing is important. And we're trying to really encourage that in our house. You have a sort of influence. There's a respect level that you have over your base that you might realize or you might not realize. And so those words coming from you are going to be more meaningful from the governor of your state. They're going to be more meaningful than some other popular cultural icon in some capacity, because now it's coming from Kristen Quinn. It's coming from Patrick. It's coming from Tim. It's coming from Tom. It's coming from Jessica. Jessica said that I need to wash my hands for 30 seconds, or I need to properly social distance. That's small, just a small little video, right? And then have that staff member send you the video. That way you can look at it and make certain it's appropriate before you upload it, but it's done. Quick little message to our kids. Start small, start fun size, okay? Now, where do we get beyond fun size? Let's say we do that and we're like, okay, now my confidence is building. I felt like that really went good. It got lots of likes, which made me happy. Some things that we're looking to consider, and I sent this out to staff recently, and I know I sent it in an email out to folks too, so if you're already familiar with it, I apologize for being redundant. But we're doing a weekly parent cafe, and this is strictly for parents. So this invite goes to parents and I guess adults. So it might be surrogate family members, because not every family is built the same way. It's not just going to be your leave it to beaver, traditional nuclear family, mom and dad. Sometimes the grandparents are the most important guardian, or the most present guardian, I should say, or an aunt or an uncle or something along those lines. And talking to them, because our kids, while they're incredibly important, what's going to manifest in the home is through the leadership of the home, the adults. And so if they're in a good mental place, if they're in a strong place, call it, and again, you can call it whatever you want, but we're calling it a parent cafe. And we suggest that they get a cup of coffee. And we keep the topics mild to begin with, almost like we do with the kids. Just say, tell me what's going on in your life. Tell me just share with me what your biggest struggle is right now. If you start very simple like that, they're going to have something and they're going to share it. It's going to be cathartic. And it's priming the pump. Before you want to maybe get into something that has a little more depth, prime the pump and see how they're doing. Talk about what food they miss the most from takeout, or what restaurant they would go to if it immediately opened. Very, very small conversational bits. And then you can get into something, say, tell me what your kids are struggling with the most right now. Or tell me your thoughts on camp. If you guys talked about camp, what can we be doing to help support you in some capacity? So the Parent Cafe is an opportunity for them, just from an adult-centric standpoint. It's just for them and not necessarily for the whole family, for the kids. We have Tea Time with Taylor, which is one of our, she's a teacher. She's one of our tremendous volunteers, and she connects really. You have one of those staff members or multiple staff members that really, really connects with the teens. Like if that person is not at an event, they're saying, where's Taylor? Where's this person at? Because they really, really connect. You can choose that staff member. And again, the topics, like one of the things she did during Tea Time with Taylor was simply, if you could have one superpower, what would it be? And the kids will engage. Start off light. You don't have to get real heavy right off the bat. People are, it's almost like a water faucet. When you turn on the water faucet, you try to get the temperature warm, before it feels right. You can't just get into a conversation right off the bat and say, tell me what your greatest fear is, because immediately people aren't warmed up and they're not ready for that. They want to hear something that's going to just engage them or be a little bit light to begin with. So if you start with kind of light and then you get the temperature right, you can go further down that rabbit hole with depth. And it doesn't have to be an hour. Tea Time with Taylor could be 10 minutes, be 5 minutes. Daniel, just give me a cue if I'm going too long. I'll speed it up. Should I speed up?
Maybe 2 more minutes, Mark.
Okay, I'll speed up. Okay, and then what special talents do your staff have? Like some of ours are incredibly crafty. So we're gonna send them some crafting materials, and then we're also gonna potentially send them to kids, like a friendship bracelet. So if you sign up on this date, let's say it's May 6th, we're gonna do friendship bracelets. If you're in, we'll mail it to you. And then Susie and Laura are gonna be making it through a Zoom video, and you can make it with them at the very same time. Or cooking. If someone's just cooking in their house, I'm going to teach you how to prepare a perfect omelet. bedtime stories. Just get the Giving Tree by Shel Silverstein. Get some wonderful childhood book and say, tonight at 8 o'clock, you're going to be read a bedtime story before you go to bed from one of your camp staff. We have like yoga and squat challenges. We have camp songs like a campfire. Ask the counselors, a Q&A, and it might just be getting to know you. You know, the Q&A could be simply be, you know, tell me how you met your wife. And then the counselors can discern what's too private for them, what's not too private. You can even monitor the questions like Daniel's doing right here with the chat. So maybe the campers submit a question to a monitor, the monitor filters the questions, and then if it's appropriate, then the counselors can answer appropriately. One of our counselors is a beekeeper, so he's going to go out to his hives and he's going to show a little of the detail with beekeeping. Another one of our staff members has domestic farm animals, and so he's going to show what it's like to feed the chickens and collect eggs and things like that that the kids might have. One of our fabulous psychosocial professionals, Caitlin, is going to just teach breathing and meditation, how to relax, how to work through anxiety at this point in time. One of the things that we're thinking about too is cabin activity time. So we'll have different quadrants. So if like 60 people join on in, we'll compartmentalize that group of 8 to last year's cabin. And just that last year's cabin, we'll either talk about something that they did last year at camp. It could be some special thing that they're revisiting, or it could just be like, hey, let's just kind of catch up. So I'll provide that whole list too to make available. So those are just some different things that you can potentially do as well through social media platforms in some capacity. And so I'll go ahead and conclude because Daniel gave me 2 minutes, and I appreciate your patience with this. I could continue to talk, but I'm going to just conclude by saying this again. I want you to look at my eyeballs one more time. I mean this when I say this. I love you people. I respect you people. I admire you people. Don't let this stop you. Okay, this thing is not going to stop us. We're going to come back stronger. We're going to come back better. We're going to come up with more ideas that we can utilize than even before. 2020 can be absolutely spectacular. Let's stay in contact with one another, support one another, and make this an awesome year. Thank you for your time.
Amazing, amazing, amazing. Coop, thank you for your wisdom. Thank you for your enthusiasm. Truly, I know you could talk for hours and we can all sit here and listen to you. I do want to be mindful of people's times. We did get some really great comments and questions. So from our friends from Midwest Children's Burn Camp, they just wanted to state Flipgrid is another great platform in which you could use. They use it for their Staff Spirit Day, and it could be shared on their Facebook page too. So another platform to use. Mark is giving a thumbs up saying that's a great one. Another comment from Mackenzie. She wanted to know, do you know of any platforms that are HIPAA compliant?
Ooh,
I can throw this out there. Zoom is actually HIPAA compliant. There is an ability which you can purchase it. It's a separate platform from what we're using here today. I will be honest, I've done some research on it. It's about $200 a month.
okay.
So it is pricey, but I will say it is used in the medical community where doctors and mental health professionals are able to do charting. So it is available. Another question we got from Tom Flam. He said, Mark, do you know the limit to Zoom attendance? Is it 100?
No, it depends. It's like you're saying, there's different platforms that you can have. I think the biggest one might be 400, but I don't etch that in stone. But I know that we chose the 100 because the 100 was right for us, and $15 a month sounds great to us. So I know that there's more robust services that you can purchase. And the other thing I would say is TechSoup. If you're not familiar with a location called TechSoup, it's basically a not-for-profit that sells software to not-for-profit organizations. So like if you were to buy like a Microsoft product through Best Buy or whatever like that, you're going to pay a certain price. If you go through TechSoup, you can get it at a heavily discounted price. In some instances, they'll even offer something like a Zoom platform for free for 3 months or 4 months or something like that too. So check it out. Do it. TechSoup is brilliant. We buy almost everything software related through them because they can heavily discount everything.
Just wanted to say thank you, Jillian Clark, for your comment. Docs MITI, I hope I'm saying that correctly, is also a HIPAA compliant format docs MITI. I hope I'm saying that right, but that's what Jillian said. So more information, contact Jillian Clark. She has the proper name of that service. We are going to start wrapping up. My portion was just on considerations that you should start thinking about. Like I mentioned earlier in the presentation, we're not giving you a stance for IABC on whether you should or should not have a camp this year. But I do want to throw out these questions to you as you consider if you're going to have camp, if you're not going to have camp for this summer, if you decide to go virtual, or if you decide to not go virtual. So just some of these questions I want you to sit with as you start to think about your planning. First, in consideration of having camp or not, I want to ask you, have you thought about your volunteers? Will your volunteers still be able to attend camp right now, considering that a lot of our volunteers are from the medical community and firefighters? Will they be able to take the time off? Another question to ask yourself during this time, will campers be able to get their physical forms from their doctors with everything going on with COVID right now? Is that something that they're able to get signed off and able to go and be seen with the restrictions and being seen by a doctor? What considerations have you thought about for your camp in terms of travel? Airlines, buses, public transportation. Many of our camps are in one state, so you're busing and sending people into one area, and many of them are coming from very hotbed places where COVID is very rapid. So have you considered that? Do you have a communicable disease plan? Do you have a plan in which your camp has thought about if there was something to happen, COVID related or non-COVID related? Every single year there is some kind of disease or some kind of infection going on. So have you thought about that? And if you have thought about that, does that include hand washing station, temperature checks, isolations, quarantine areas? Have you thought about social distancing at camp? Many of our campers are in bunks. So have you thought about maybe having your campers head to toes instead of head to head to maybe not have the spread of any airborne diseases happen? Have you thought about hugging? My camp is a huge hugging community. And when you talk about having your camp, have you thought about the touch of that? Other considerations in terms of camps, many of us are nonprofit camps, and many of us are dependent on the fundraising ability we have. With no fundraising happening in person, how are you going to financially pay for your camp to happen at this time? So those are considerations on if you're going to have a camp or if you're not. Some considerations just to have in general around our campers and their families. Have you thought about the equitable factor in this? Mark talked a lot about virtual camps. Have you thought about many of your campers not being able to have access to a tablet, to a computer, to internet? And if they do have access to these things, have you thought about that they may be competing with their brothers, their sisters, their mom, their dad on all of these devices? So maybe it's not doing a live video, but maybe you're doing something that's a recorded video that you can send. Maybe your consideration is what my camp is looking at to do is camp in a box, where you send a large box to every single child and you include in that box cabin decorations, their name tag, maybe a camp t-shirt, arts and craft projects that they may want, maybe even a daily snack for them. Have you thought about the impact that your campers are having? And this goes back to a lot of what Kristen had talked about, but about the emotional safety of our campers, the loss and grief and frustration that they have of being in their homes right now. There's a great article that Kristen's shared on Facebook about the New York Times and parents and dealing with parents talking with their children about everything being canceled right now and the frustration within that. Have you thought about suicidal and self-harm for both our campers and our parents? Isolation is a huge thing. And unfortunately, when you're frustrated or you're depressed or you're in these tough situations, these thoughts come up a lot. So have you thought about resources that you're sending to your families, hotline information? Have you thought about substance abuse? A lot of people are struggling right now, so they turn to coping mechanisms that may be doing, and that's available that may be something that be impacting your campers as well as their families. Domestic violence, child abuse. Have you thought about, are your campers just being at risk for COVID? The Phoenix Society did an awesome article with Dr. Joe from UC Irvine about are burn survivors impacted or higher risks for COVID and what does that look like? So I encourage you to check out their website. So there's a lot of considerations, as you can see in this conversation, and a lot more things we can talk about for a lot of times. So we really want this to be a starting point as we move forward in this conversation. I thank Mark and Kristen for their hard work in providing a short presentation related to COVID today. And as I mentioned, there's a lot more we can talk about. So leaving this place today and having us being able to wrap up everything that we're talking about, I just want to say we are going to be offering another section next Friday, same time, same platform through Zoom, where we will be going into more of the discussion. We realized we were talking at you today and there was a lot of presentation, and I know my camp family, I know all of you have great ideas and a lot of you are experts in your own fields. So next conversation will be a discussion format. We will be breaking people up in a function within Zoom called breakout rooms. We'll be choosing these breakout rooms on topics and we'll be rotating you within those breakout rooms. So we'll send more information on next Friday and what that plan looks like, as well as a whole list of resources. Part of what I was doing in my considerations was looking at what are things already out there. So I just really want to highlight some key information houses that I've gathered a lot of my information from. The American Camp Association is constantly putting out information related to COVID. The Association of Camp Nurses has a lot of great information if you're talking about communicable diseases. Sorry, let me just read off my list. The Phoenix Society has a lot of great information and a lot of emotional support, both for adults and for child burn survivors. I really highly encourage you to look at their support groups as well as their check-ins that they are offering. ABA has offered the American Burn Association some good references as well. The CDC, any of your state legislation in terms of COVID and restrictions of COVID, Child Safety Network, Nonprofit Times, Camp Docs. There's a lot of good information. So I'll be sending out a list of all these references. I do want to encourage you before you jump off, if you're not currently a member of IABC or you're unsure if you're a member, please go ahead and send us an email today to confirm that. We do have a few camps that have not turned in their membership thus far, and we would love to see you represented. If there are any questions that you have after this presentation that were not answered or considerations that you would like to see in terms of a presentation and a webinar from IABC, please let us know that also. Thank you for being here. Thank you for being a part of this. We really appreciate all of you today. We are in this together. We are better, stronger, and more powerful together than alone. So please continue to stay engaged, and we will see you hopefully next week.
Excellent.
Awesome. Awesome. Thanks, everybody, for joining. The board really appreciates it. And a reminder, if you are canceling or postponing your camp, please send us an email and let us know so we can keep our website updated.
Stay safe. Have a good weekend, everybody.
Bye, everyone.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye, Nancy, I love seeing that baby.
Bye.
Oh, I'm so glad.
Oh, she's a cutie,
She's my
Mackenzie.
first one.